as we kind of expected, but we did that poll to see what would be, preferable, and it was kind of split. So we wanted to go ahead and do this and move on. There will be an opportunity for a little more input, but I really thank y'all who are here. Wendy is putting the link to the slide deck in the chat, so you can access it there. I will also share my screen, so let me get that going for you. Make sure I have on the right screen. Bear with me here. All right, here it is. It's a hot one today, isn't it, guys?
I was in France for 3 weeks and it was like 70 degrees the whole time. It was so amazing. And then we got back yesterday and I was like, did I live in this? How did I survive?
I feel like the humidity is just crazy lately. I mean, you're walking in a swamp. So, welcome to our last working group meeting of the summer before we launch into plan development. Again, thanks so much for being here. We're just going to kind of tie things up. The link to the slide deck is in the chat. Wendy is, and all of the links to the tools we'll be using are on that first slide. The second slide is for you to use however you'd like. If you have announcements or questions, feel free to post them there. So today is indicators and accountability. This is part 3 of the framework that we've been building out over the last few meetings. The agenda today is once we kind of get over where we've been, we'll go through a couple of activities. Like I said, the rest of that framework, the outcomes and indicators, and then the accountability structure, and then we'll wrap up. So the objectives are 2. First, define the indicators to measure progress towards desired outcomes of the whole plan. So this is where we've been in the weeds. Now we're like going to the top and we're really looking at the overarching outcomes of this plan and how do we measure success. And then will be the second objective is brainstorming an accountability structure. What does that mean? Accountability, transparency, reporting, all of those elements. We'd really like to get your thoughts on that. So this is all about, how are we going to make sure that we're making progress on the strategies that we've developed, and then how are we holding ourselves and each other accountable? So you're familiar with the ground rules. We have a great group. Don't need to go over those. You know where we are in the process at the very end of the plan development. And then just to show you what's coming up, I'll spend a minute on this slide. We're now wrapping up our work with you, and over the next several months, we'll be drafting the plan, pulling together all of the amazing content that you and others have been creating, and then we'll put together a draft plan. We'll show that to you in November. We'll circle back together, and then we'll put it out to the community for a community engagement period. And the final goal of seeking approval will be next summer and fall. So that's what is next. That's what's coming up. Any questions on that? Looks like a bunch just joined us, so thanks. I'm glad to see you all here. Wendy might want to put the chat or the slide deck in the chat again for those who just joined so they can follow along. So the draft structure, again, we're down here at the bottom. We've been talking about this last piece of the indicators and the implementation next steps. And, like I said, the past few meetings have been all about the impact mapping and the implementation next steps and partners and funding and financing, all those pieces we're really tying up now. So just to show you how that work led to where we are today, our team took a look at all the input maps and all the work from those meetings to refine the strategies, and we'll be reaching out to you guys in the near future to see if you have any talents that you would like to share with us, or if you'd like to volunteer in any way with the plan development. We'll have a quick survey at the end of the meeting, but just to show you, we pulled together what we had, and what we're going to be talking about is how the outputs and outcomes were kind of created from the last meeting, how they got turned into overarching outcomes for the plan, and how the impacts got turned into the indicators for the plan. And again, we'll go through the accountability and transparency. So that's the summer strategy refinement process. And where we are today is on this indicators piece. So be thinking about the plan as the big picture, and how do we make sure we're getting to the outcomes that you and the rest of the community want us to see through the implementation of RVAgreen 2050 strategies. So as I said, the outcomes, the way we're thinking of that is with the whole plan, all 5 pathways. An outcome is defined as an aspect of the future Richmond that the community wants to see. And we heard these from you, we heard these from listening sessions, we heard them from the community engagement. And this is how we're gonna know if all of our strategies are doing what the community wants us to be doing, and if we're successful in the implementation of them. So that's the outcome, and we know that the plan will be successful, that our strategies are successful if we accomplish these outcomes. So let's see, the next piece is the indicator to get to those 12 outcomes. So the indicator is kind of that data point that demonstrates progress toward an outcome. When we go into our activity, it's going to be really easy to get into the weeds and think about all the potential data points that we might want to collect to ensure, success of our strategies. But this is really a high-level indicator across all 5 pathways that will demonstrate progress toward that outcome. And you'll see in an example that I'll give what that looks like.
Dawn, real quick, Carrie put a question in the chat, just thinking about the city pathway to equity. Is RVAgreen 2050 happening independent of the other equity planning projects at the city, or how are the different plans connected or aligned?
That is a fantastic question, and it's probably a really long answer. I know Alicia is on the call. If you want to respond to that, Alicia. I think she might be trying to do a couple things at once.
I'm here. Sorry, I just had trouble clicking back on. So can you just repeat that? I heard equity in terms of connecting with other.
Sure. I'll read big picture question. Thinking about the city pathway to equity, is RVAgreen 2050 happening independent of the other equity planning projects at the city, or how are the different plans connected or aligned?
Yeah, so we are connecting with the other equity efforts. I'm not sure which specific effort the question was related to. So if you want to clarify that, I can speak specifically to.
Yeah, so I was in a transit talk yesterday where Dorana Moore Clark was talking about her brand new group, which is a new city team. And then there was also talk about the city's Pathway to Equity planning project, which is another project. And so she had this slide, and it was all these bubbles with all the different planning projects. And I was just trying to put myself in the perspective of an average Richmonder. What does this mean? How is it connected? Are they all independent planning processes, or are we trying to all do the same thing separately and then the best rises to the top? I just want to make sure that I know how to explain it to someone when they ask me, well, you're on RVAgreen 2050. Well, isn't that what Pathway to Equity is doing too?
Yeah, so thanks for clarifying, Carrie. So no, ideally they are not all separate nor doing the same thing. We certainly don't want to be duplicating efforts internally at the city. And so specifically with Dirana's office and their planning process, I think the best way to maybe think about it in terms of the connection to what they're doing and what we're doing is they're related, and ours is sort of at a higher level and not as down into the weeds as theirs is. And so we're sort of setting the more of a foundation, much like Richmond 300 did with more higher level policy direction. And then what their office is doing with their planning effort is then getting more detailed. So almost more like our strategies we've been aligning with their office since they started their planning process. I'm sitting on their steering committee for their planning process. And so, yes, we're definitely working together, and it is interrelated. And then what we hope to see is that the strategies that are in RVAgreen 2050, a lot of those will be implemented through efforts like Dirana's and other departments, because a lot of the work that our office is doing, we're not the actual people in the city that are implementing, building buildings, putting transportation infrastructure in. So we have to work with our colleagues in other departments to get a lot of these strategies in RVAgreen 2050 actually implemented. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think the simplest way that I would explain it to someone who asked me is the DPW team, the Dirana team is implementation. The DPU team is planning. Is that
well,
too
the
simplistic?
Office of Sustainability team.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to think about it for purposes of this plan.
Great question, though. Those are exactly the kinds of things that we are, trying to be proactive about and make sure that we are aligning and integrating and, pulling all of this together and streamlining all of the efforts as best as we can. So thank you.
Yeah, I definitely hear a lot of the same language. So that's why I wanted to better understand what's the flow of the process.
That slide sounds interesting, though. I'd love to see that bubble slide you're talking about. That sounds like a good one. All right, so the indicators are those data points that demonstrate progress toward an outcome. So, that the outcome is the aspect of the future Richmond that the community wants to see. The indicator is how we're measuring success toward that outcome. And again, it's not just transportation, it's all the pathways. And I think I saw a question in the chat asking about that. All 5 working groups are doing this same exercise this week. So we're going to be taking together everyone's feedback and refining these indicators. So there's, when you think about indicators toward success, thanks, Carrie, there's kind of a traditional indicator, and then we definitely want to make sure we're centering equity. So we're also looking at, for each outcome, how can we center, what kind of data points could we be collecting to demonstrate equitable progress toward an outcome? So for each outcome, again, we'll be looking at least one traditional indicator and then at least one equity indicator. And then from there, we will be potentially disaggregating further by race or income or demographics, other demographics. And so all of these support all the pathways and objectives. And I just want to show you an example. So one of our outcomes that folks wanted to see is a cleaner and more efficient transportation network in Richmond. That's an outcome. And again, we're trying to rise up as much as we can. So when we looked at all the impacts and all the strategies, the indicator that kind of was the highest umbrella to capture all of the measurements of our strategies is increased mode shift away from single occupancy internal combustion engine vehicles. So that's kind of a mouthful, and there might be a better way of saying that. But the idea is that many of our strategies in transportation specifically, if they're successful, they will be captured. That measurement of success will be captured if we can figure out what data points we can include in that indicator. And then the second one is percentage of travel that is not with a single occupancy internal combustion engine vehicle. So those are two potential indicators for that outcome. But then if we really want to center equity in a measurement of that outcome, it would be percent of jobs accessible within a certain commute time via public transit, or maybe it's a percentage of people within a 10-minute walk of a transit stop with amenities, such as a cover and a bench. And then we could further disaggregate that by neighborhood or race or income. So those are, where we kind of brainstormed and landed. But today's activity is going to be asking you for your thoughts on all of that. So just to be clear, that we started with the 12 outcomes across the entire plan, all pathways. And then for each outcome, we have at least one indicator, which is the data point to demonstrate progress toward the outcome. And then centering equity is essential. So in addition to that more traditional indicator, and maybe something that's already being collected, we'll have equity indicators to ensure that we're making progress toward the outcome that is resilient, will decrease carbon emissions, and will also help to achieve an equitable outcome. So each outcome is supported by multiple pathways and objectives and strategies. This one isn't just transportation. I pulled this one out to show you guys because it's most relevant to transportation, but community, buildings, they all touch these. So let me show you what that breakdown looks like. But first, let me show you what the 12 outcomes are. So cleaner and more efficient buildings, engaged and involved community. We heard improved air quality, advanced green economy, increased support for climate action and resilience, more green space and trees, lower greenhouse gas emissions, increased heat resilience, increased flood resilience, a climate-ready community, less landfill waste, and cleaner and more efficient transportation. So those are the 12 outcomes. If we're successful in all of our strategies, that's what Richmond will look like, and it'll be a beautiful place. So across all 12 outcomes and all 5 pathways and all of our objectives, this is kind of, we went back and just did a double check to make sure that they're all encompassing. And sure enough, this is where the objectives kind of fell, just so you can see. This table is not for people to try to read, but we wanted to show that those 12 outcomes will be achieved through the implementation of the strategies across the entire plan. So what we're going to focus on today, these are the ones in green that are most relevant to transportation. So we're going to talk about the engaged and involved community, the improved air quality, the advanced green economy, the increased support for climate action and resilience, lower greenhouse gas emissions, increased heat resilience, climate-ready community, and cleaner and more efficient transportation. So those are the ones that we would like your feedback on today. So in a couple minutes, we're going to go into 2 breakout rooms, and we'll split those in half. So the questions that we want you to be thinking about is, are these the right indicators and equity indicators for the outcomes? Where can we find the data for those indicators? Obviously, if we're going to be holding ourselves accountable, and this is work that we're going to be reporting on a regular basis, it needs to be easily attainable. And remember that these are across all of it's for the whole plan. It's not just for transportation. We're trying to think of indicators for the whole plan. Where can we find the data for those indicators? And if it doesn't exist, how can we get it? And which indicators can be disaggregated by race, income, and other factors? So I want you to be thinking about those questions. I'll be in the main room, and I'll keep half of you with me. We'll talk about the 4 on slide 23. And then Wendy and Brianne are going to be in the other breakout room, and they'll be talking about the second 4. So the questions, if you have the link, you can see the questions in the bottom. The facilitator will take notes. This is really just an open discussion. So I appreciate you all being here. Do you have any questions at this point?
What time are we going back, Dawn? Sorry.
Okay, so we're going to take about 40 minutes. So at 2 o'clock, we'll come back together. If you finish early, come back early. If you need more time, that's fine as well. This is just really important, so we want to get your thoughts on this. And I don't know if anyone else on my team would like to offer more background while I split up the breakouts. Okay, well, go ahead and take a couple minute break while I do this. And at 1:25, you'll go into a breakout and then come back about 5 after. We'll take 40 minutes for this activity. Okay, I think I split it up into groups of 2. So I'm gonna go ahead and open the room. And if you have any questions for me, just in the top right corner, click return to main room. Otherwise, like I said, Brianne and Wendy will be working with half of you and I'll have the other group. I'm gonna start the rooms. Hi, Shelley.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Can't complain.
Good.
Yeah.
You're such a busy person. I'm so glad that you could join us today.
Thank you. Thanks. I was like, I am going to be here today.
It's a good one. Maybe we could take just a minute to kind of everyone introduce themselves in this space.
Sure, that would be great.
I guess I'll just call on folks, and since Shelley has her camera on, we can start with you.
Okay, hey, Shelley Francis. I am one of the co-founders of EV Hybrid Noir. We're the nation's largest network of diverse EV drivers and enthusiasts. Also the co-founder of a technology mobility solutions company called EV Noir. And we work on e-mobility best practices as well as e-mobility diversity, equity, and inclusion. So my connection to Richmond is I'm a University of Richmond alum, also Medical College of Virginia alum. So really great to be working as part of the collaborative group.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How about Julie? Are you on?
Hey, Dawn, thank you. Julie Manzari. I work for the innovation team at Dominion Energy.
Great. Thanks for being here. And Alan?
Hey, Alan. Alan and I work on some other projects together as well.
And he's a busy guy too. So how about Diane? Oh, you're muted.
Yep, I just figured that out. I'm Diane Linderman, and I am with VHB, which is a consulting engineering firm here, and I'm in downtown and have a lot of experience in public works.
Yeah, thanks. And Sandra.
Nice to meet you.
Sandra has had some technology issues on these meetings. I'm so sorry. Thank you for bearing with us, Sandra. We always love your input. So if she can't get the sound going and she can type in the chat, I can't type in the chat, but maybe you guys can help me keep an eye on that. Okay, so let's start with this first one. Outcome, engaged and involved community. So if we're successful with all of our strategies, we will have an engaged and involved community. So some indicators of that, how do we ensure progress toward that outcome? What we thought is maybe total participation in climate action and resilience initiatives, but of course that would need to be defined. Or maybe compare city-based and community-based initiatives and the participation of those. Do you guys have any other thoughts on how we would measure the progress toward an engaged and involved community?
What about is in terms of like a deliverable, like would there be like a collaborative, strategy, like a collaborative plan that involves community input that, at the end of this date, we'll have this, documented, or we'll have agreement on what our 2 or 3 priority areas are.
Yeah, keep going with that. I like it.
Okay.
Look like?
So let's see. So we're talking about doing resilient initiatives that will be defined. So like agreement. So you're going to measure your total number of participants, both from the city-based versus community-based organization. So you want to do that. And then I would say, let me see, like number of resilient initiatives completed, or yeah. And then I was thinking in terms of this idea, in terms of like agreeing upon like 2 or 3 deliverables. It could be, an event. It could be like a couple goals. But essentially, what I'm getting at is like kind of having this ongoing feedback loop with community, however community is defined, so that we're getting like continual feedback throughout the process. And that latter one is, and that latter one is probably could be flagged as like the equity indicator, as one of the equity indicators.
Well, I'm with Shelley on this one. I think this is really like what is your participation and utilization rate for your initiative? So if you have an initiative and 1 Richmonder is participating, that's not very good. If you have like 20% of the population, there's probably some number that means your programs are successful.
Mm-hmm.
So I would kind of measure it that way.
Yeah. And I like where you go with that too. Oh, let me turn down the volume because I got a little feedback. Also, like measuring or capturing the type of organization. So like you're hitting diverse sectors of the community, because you don't want all just like one group of folks participating. You want to hear like diverse perspective, diverse voices to be engaged and participate in these initiatives. And that could be as simple as like capturing the types of organizations that the participants represent, or like the communities. So there's a few ways to kind of peel back that peel the layers back on that.
Yeah, I feel like you could measure it also from maybe income level, geographic areas within the city, types of, how people live. Are they living in multifamily housing or homes? Like, I think you could do a cross section on who's involved.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess the only concern I have is how do you capture the data?
So if you're doing a virtual event, you could do like a brief, survey, like a
Sure.
4 or 5 question survey that you ask people to complete. And you can give them a space to do that, during the event so that you actually know that you'll get it done.
Mhm. So when I first looked at this, I was totally on the opposite side of where you are. Not that I don't think your ideas are really good, but I was trying to think of, okay, so what metric means that the community has been involved? The first thing that came to my mind, which I don't really like, is recycling, right? So like if the tons of recycling material go up, is that a measurement of that people are more engaged in climate action? If I don't know, if our carbon footprint goes down, or but I didn't come up with the right thing, and maybe because there isn't one, but I was wondering if there's something that indicates that if it happens and you can measure it, that means that there has to be more community people involved, because you couldn't do it yourselves as a city, for example. But
Okay, I like that. Say that one more time. The last thing you said.
because you can't do it all. The city can't do everything. So you've got to. So now I can't remember exactly what I said.
It
Sorry.
was right before that. Something about if we're
Well, that go around
capturing
recycling.
the information on number of recyclers.
Right.
and-
That has to mean that that the community is doing more towards being more involved, right? If the tons of recycling, or if our carbon footprint goes down, or if I don't know, if we have I don't think we can use temperature, but if the average temperature goes down, does that mean that we're doing I don't think that one works, but those, I was trying to figure if there was something that could only happen if it was more than just a small group doing it, right? Number of electric vehicles, I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe as we get into the development of the specific strategies, we can find an indicator for engaged and involved community. Like, this is what that means. And then there's some total number at the end with some kind of data points.
Well, I also think this category is like right for like measuring engagement in social media.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, like I don't know, like maybe you have an RVAgreen 2050 Facebook group or Reddit hashtag or something like that. I don't know what the city's willing to do, but it's like there are a lot of ways you can measure sentiment and engagement on some of the social. Now that doesn't account for everybody, but it's one way that you can measure some communities.
So Don, Sandra wrote in the chat. She says, I believe in the saying, show them better than you can tell them. Outreach showcase initiatives where community engagement and participation is encouraged and recognized as collaborative efforts.
So what does that mean for an indicator? So the quality of the engagement more so than the number?
Or is it like the event, the number of outreach showcase events?
And Donna, are we talking about equity indicators at the same time?
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump to that. So demographics of participation.
Yeah, I think that's,
the goal is to match citywide demographics and compare city-based and community-based initiatives participation, and then usage of the equity screening tool and climate equity index. So if that one's really centering equity. So we've said income building type. All right, thanks, Julie. You know, are there other data points that because the Climate Equity Index has like 40 different GIS layers. So are there specifics that you think are most important to center equity in our community engagement?
Like the air quality levels in the communities of target.
Yep, that's one. Well, air quality. So the next one, we can talk about that in just a minute.
Yeah.
But
Is there one that's about heat islands or heat indexes?
well, yep. And so the heat
That's air
index
quality too?
is
Okay.
Yep, heat resilience.
Okay.
So I think we hit it. Equity indicators. Do you like these? The demographics of participation. We've talked about how to measure participation. We've talked about a couple of tools that we could use. We've talked about a couple different demographics: type of housing, income, geography, race, cross section of who's involved.
John, I'm sorry that I missed the first part. This is not just transportation, right? This is
Correct.
This is okay.
Overarching. Yep.
Okay. Got it.
Don, I'm sorry if this is an absurd question, but do we have statistics on asthma rates or neighborhood level health impacts that might be mitigated with some of the improved air quality?
So the answer to that is we have that kind of information at this census level,
Right.
and those impacts fall under one of the other outcomes called, I think the other group is talking about
Health.
it. Climate ready community. So that's stuff that's going to help the health and well-being of our community. But
That's perfect. I was just going to suggest that as an improved air quality component for going from start to stop with those metrics, but they're in the other category, which is great.
yeah, they're in that other one, but let's go ahead and jump to improved air quality. So the traditional indicator for that is the days per year with poor air quality. And then an equity indicator could be the neighborhood level air quality. We don't have that right now. It was recently obtained through an independent study, but we don't have a methodology to monitor that ongoing. So we need to come up with what that looks like. But are those the right indicators for improved air quality?
Are there any big sources of air pollution that you're tracking in neighborhoods that you could improve as well?
Yeah.
Like what?
An example would be that stinky like paper plant south of the city. But maybe there's something else that is a hot button air quality climate item on your radar that maybe a stationary power more than the transportation side.
Yeah. Are there
Another
areas?
The airport.
Mhm.
So I think I had mentioned the heat islands. Like if you plant more trees, then you'll reduce your heat islands, and that will improve air quality because you assume that trees help air quality.
Yep. So we have an outcome of more green space and trees, and we have resilient to heat impacts. So they're all kind of interrelated. And if an outcome is improved air quality, we're talking about particulates, we're talking about, asthma. Then consider stationary pollution sources. If we're talking about transportation pollution, I'm not sure if there's another.
So for this one, for improved air quality, I think it was, I can see her it looks like a pink shirt, but I can't see what your name is. Diane. Okay, now I can't see here's the board. Can we also put in there, so she mentioned the green spaces and adding additional tree coverage. So could we add increased number of, tree canopy, tree planting projects? Because that helps impact.
Yeah, and that is that is another outcome. It's
Oh,
called,
somewhere else.
yeah, it's called
More green
more
space
green
and
space
trees.
and trees.
Okay,
And
there you go.
then-
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
those are being measured by tree canopy cover.
Okay.
So in terms of just measuring air quality, unless you can think of another indicator,
Yeah.
days. Another one that came up was number of days. What was the term called? Like poor, like work days missed because of, oh geez, just typed this in a different document.
So just being mispositive, would you have
Mhm.
would it be more of an increase of days of, I don't know what the levels are, but not poor, but good or best or whatever the top level is? Can you go the opposite way and want more good days of air quality versus less bad days?
Yeah, it's a number that Alicia found that is being counted. Oh, I could have sworn I typed it in here yesterday.
Do we know how many poor days we have per year, approximately? Doesn't seem like it's that many.
That is so funny. I could have sworn I just added it. Oh well. Yeah, I'll have to go back and look and see what that says, but if we can
Could there be anything about like investment by industry in air or air quality improvements? I don't know what that means.
like some DEQ data point on air permits and air quality.
Yeah.
DEQ effort.
And this might have been another one, like use the increase in numbers of vehicles using alternative fuels. Does that fall somewhere else? Because if you assume people are not driving, improve air quality.
Yeah, and electric vehicles.
Yeah, because you could do that for multimodal transportation, like bikes all the way up to medium heavy duty.
And that information is probably trackable through like the DMV data.
Mm-hmm.
So on that other one down here, cleaner and more efficient transportation, if we're counting, oh, I didn't change it. I need to change this for them, or they're going to be really confused. I put it in the example. You know what? I'm sorry, guys. Give me just a minute here while you think of
no
that.
problem.
Oh, I changed it on this one. I didn't change it. So on that other example I gave about the transportation, that's where they're measuring the increased mode shift way and the percent travel, not with. All right, so back to ours.
I had I added. I'm trying to make sure that I didn't put this in the wrong place, but for an equity measurement for improved air quality, I have thought about decreasing the number of hazardous waste facilities, and then another measurement of decreased number of ER admissions for asthma, respiratory illnesses.
And you put that.
It's in the chat.
Oh,
yeah, it's in the chat.
It is in the chat.
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see
it's in the chat.
Okay, great.
When you say hazardous waste facilities, you mean ones that are processing hazardous waste or land that's contaminated?
So processing,
Okay.
burning, or
Okay, yep.
emitting toxic fumes, pollutants.
Sandra's here. Okay, so then, anything more? Oh, you got an equity. Okay. All right, advanced green economy. So that one's a little less pinned down. A lot of the strategies, as we were doing the impact mapping, people were saying, well, if we do this, it's going to help the economy. It's going to help people have more access to jobs and better jobs. And, businesses doing green things is going to be good for everybody. So this advanced green economy sounds great, but how do we measure that improvement? What's an indicator of success? Is it the number of businesses that are participating or undertaking green practices? Is it the number of programs for training and education related to this work? Is it the number of green jobs? Are there data points that are already being collected that could help us kind of, gauge that advanced green economy? I would love to hear your thoughts.
I'm going to say one metric could be the Green Jobs Tax Credit, which is a $500 tax credit awarded for the creation of a new job.
Oh.
And it might be the kind of thing that you could FOIA for or just ask for from the Treasury.
And that's a statewide, that's a state tax credit.
It's my understanding that's a state tax credit.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else has tracked metrics like how effective it is by the census tract or something like that, but it might be the case where you could say, please tell me who's achieved these green jobs, and then if you have that accountability metric, you'll be working to create those jobs or to yeah.
It does seem like your equity indicator is reasonable. If you're training more people, then they're likely entering the workforce in green jobs, and therefore, so that
I would also add like capturing the demographics of those participants who are enrolled in the programs or getting the jobs. So like finding like similar to what we did in that first note in that first outcome is like capturing demographics.
Mm-hmm.
If they're coming from like easy communities as well.
What about the number of apprenticeship and training events? I'm also thinking, I just emailed the local IBEW chapter, and we're doing all sorts of work with them in a project with Shelley as well. And that could be an area where we could be of assistance on the like electric vehicle side. Maybe not everything, but I'm sorry, actually on everything electrical, but on the electrical side.
Explain that a little more.
The IBEW has an apprenticeship program, and then they pay people like $50 an hour, $47 an hour once they're actually linemen. And the training program is specifically focused on disadvantaged communities, and it goes the extra mile to like help them get to the job site and to build relationships, etc. And the looping back is that we could maybe intentionally do some training. We can and should intentionally do some training events and apprenticeships. And I just see that apprenticeship and training keyword.
And you said IBEW?
In the IBEW, chapter 666 is the local chapter in Richmond and Sandston, Virginia, for the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers. But they share the equity focus of the city.
Great. Thank you. That's great. All right, so then this last one is increased support for climate action and resilience. So a way to measure that, hold on just a sorry. So indicator percentage of RVAgreen 2050 strategies with funding. And then equity indicator would be the money available for neighborhood-based climate action resilience projects. So we had this conversation in the waste group this morning about support. What does support mean? I think most people think it means money, who's putting money at this. But yeah, that's not all of it, because you can throw a lot of money at something, but it doesn't mean that that's really the full
Yeah, right.
spectrum of support and the full spectrum of success toward that outcome. So someone suggested maybe it's the number of staff hours put towards something, or the number of strategies. If you're measuring how many are actually accomplished year to year, I don't know. Thoughts on indicators for increased support for climate action and resilience. Maybe I could ask you, Shelley, because you are a real go-getter in your niche market. How do you measure progress year to year in your efforts?
So a multitude of different ways. So impact, like number of communities served, people reached, new members, registered within the calendar year, so January 1 to December 31st. I think I said number of participants, number of events held, number of advocacy events. Like, so we do a lot of engagement with congressional leaders or state senators and representatives. So like number of touch points with political constituents or legislators, number of media hits, number of thought leadership pieces.
That's the kind of stuff.
Oh, I can also put them in the chat too, because I'm like rambling them off.
I was very impressed.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's see, media hits, number of pieces.
Increased support for climate action and resilience.
I'm putting some of the things in the chat that I rattled off.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Legislation, media.
And what about like community partnerships developed at the neighborhood level or something like that? Just vibing off of what Shelley appropriately laid out. Like, so say there's like a neighborhood association that, is now and would now then be involved in climate action and resilience, or in reducing energy costs for their community members, but like truly involved in.
Yeah, one point that was coming up earlier in this conversation is that, you can have administrators and politicians saying that they support it, but you don't really know how supportive until you see the results. And that's such a trickle down, really. So I like the idea of, linking the actual HOA involvement, and what resources are put towards that. And then, okay, yes. So the mayor says that this is important, and it's because of this, connecting the dots. And that'll really help. I think that education piece is such a huge part of this, to show everyone how it all connects.
Mhm.
So the equity indicator would be the money available for neighborhood-based climate action and resilience projects.
So is that, Dawn, is that alone a measure of equity? Or is it in census tracts where health issues are high or something? Because you could spend all of them, you could have big dollars spent in Windsor Farms and that doesn't get you equity.
What are some other demographics that would be in equity indicators for this one?
Let's see.
How could we disaggregate this indicator?
Number of partners, like committing to something, like committing to implement the RVA 2050 strategies.
John, I don't know if this goes back to that other equity column. Is it, could you relate it to flooding events? I mean, do we assume that many of our underserved neighborhoods have systems that aren't handling stormwater? I don't, yeah, or built in floodways or something.
Mm-hmm. So if we use the climate equity index to look at the neighborhoods that are, going to be affected by increased flooding, what demographics would really show that equity is centered in providing increased support? Maybe that's a way to put
Because
it.
I think the neighborhoods that flood are the ones that are probably have those lower the lower incomes, or, but I don't know. Maybe that's not true.
A lot of the neighborhoods with the urban heat islands are the ones in the formerly red line communities or really disenfranchised. So
That's good.
making sure, yeah.
Sandra typed in, there has to be a buy-in from certain communities where the support for projects that enhance a healthier climate is demanded.
I like that language. Thank you. Google sometimes. All right, well, I'm going to go back through the chat and make sure I didn't miss anything, but please call out any other thoughts you have.
I have to jump off and do an interview with a partner, but I will, keep me posted and let me know how we can continue to provide feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Shelley. Have a great day.
Oh, you're welcome. You too, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Okay, so I got Sandra's. And see, Shelley says an equity measurement. Hey, Carrie. Oh, everyone's back. Good. We just wrapped up ours too. How did that go?
Good.
Got it done?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm going to have to go back through the chat and add a little bit more language, but why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and I'll add some of that language in before we move to this next piece, and we'll go from there. Okay. I'll be back at 2:05.
Dawn and Wendy, are you guys good? The daycare is calling me, so hopefully this doesn't mean
Yeah.
my day's over.
All right. Take
All
care.
right. Thank
See you later.
you.
Marianne.
Thank you. All right, it looks like I got caught up.
To rejoin. I don't know why it booted me out when I went to the breakout room, although it didn't when this morning. So I don't know what the difference was. But
I don't know. Hopefully before we meet back up in November, we'll have some of these glitches worked out on Teams. So we'll just stay together for this second half. We won't go into a breakout. We'll just talk all together about accountability and transparency.
All right.
So as folks come back, go ahead and turn your cameras on so we know people are here. And we'll probably be able to finish up a little early today. So I know everyone will appreciate that. So let me launch into this one, and it's really just a big brainstorm on what are accountability and transparency. I know that as a government worker, we hear all the time, oh, lack of transparency. And so as, little old me, what am I capable of? Well, I can put more on a website. I can run more reports and share more data, but that doesn't mean that what I'm doing is clear to people. So when we think about this whole big plan, being transparent, what does that mean? How can we make this transparent to our community? And then the accountability piece, we started by separating those two conversations, and then we were like, really, it's all the same thing. So we're going to be asking some questions. Two questions. What does accountability for this plan mean to you? And then how would you ensure equity is centered in implementation of the strategies in terms of accountability? Who is making sure that we're being accountable about centering equity? Or how do we ensure that? So on the first one, there are 5 questions. Who is being held accountable? Who ensures accountability? How is progress reported and communicated? How can we increase and streamline interdepartmental communication and collaboration? And who owns the plan, and what does that mean? And then for the second question, we're going to be asking you, how would you ensure equity is centered in implementation of the strategies? So these are just some prompts. Should there be a new standalone group to guide implementation, and what's their role? So one example is right now we have the Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable with we have volunteers who are being paid a stipend for their lived experience to kind of participate and make sure that we are centering equity. We're getting lived experience voices, all the recommendations that center equity in our development of this process. Should that continue on in some form? And if so, what does that look like? And then can we use existing tools? We have the Climate Equity Index and we have the Equity Screening Tool. Do you know of other tools that we could use? So one example is that, say, each strategy that we, develop has an implementation team, and they're required to use the equity screening tool. And then the Office of Sustainability tracks that to make sure that, all of those questions are being considered in the implementation of the strategy. That's just one idea that's been thrown around. And then the third piece of this one is how do we delegate power and how do we get beyond the known circles? You know, the folks who are all involved, who've been involved in all of this are already strapped. So how do we get beyond those known circles and ensure that that we're really reaching the people who are going to help us center equity in these? So back to those two questions. We're not going to go into a breakout rooms. We're going to stay together and we're going to we have these sticky notes. So Wendy can put the slide deck link in the chat again for those of you who need it. If you want to go ahead and type on these sticky notes your thoughts, the 5 prompt questions are down in the bottom in the comments, and you can drag stars over. You can put your thoughts in the chat, and Wendy will be paying attention to that and putting those comments on stickies. We can type for you if you want to call it out. So why don't you just take a few minutes to think about it, look at the questions at the bottom, and then we will start this discussion on the first question.
For me, I think it comes down to funding. All these things that we're saying that we want, if the money doesn't go where the mouth is, then that's not accountability.
So who is being held accountable?
Well, within the city, isn't it city council that can approve the budget? I mean, yes, the mayor's office can present the budget, but ultimately it's council that makes the changes and accepts it. So I presume it's therefore our council elected members.
Mm-hmm. So let's say they adopt the plan next year, and then you have all these very passionate people who are trying to make everything happen. Who is holding council accountable?
The constituents.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's very vague.
Well, it's also, you know, doing community outreach and that ownership piece is, you know, just getting them involved. And I mean, it's essentially the accountability is to the community for this whole project. So that, you know, just with outreach that I've done, that's kind of the, like, how to get the buy-in, like, this is for you, and the community needs to hold their city council members accountable, just like you said about, you know, I don't want to make this political, but, you know, it's kind of hard not to. I think sometimes when you're dealing with elected officials, you know.
But they're just setting the policy. They don't implement, right?
Right. So
there's still somebody who's the implementer that has to be held accountable.
So I guess that kind of the missing, you know, lines between these dots are council approves, implementers are doing activities, implementing strategies. Constituents are the ones who at the end of the day care and are being impacted. How do you make sure that, you know, the flow is there between those three elements? You know, what the implementers are doing, the community isn't like checking in every day to make sure, okay, are you doing what you're doing? And then do they have time to go to a council meeting and complain about the fact that some staff person isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, or who is? You know, like, I think all these questions, like, how do we make this
well, there has to be a reporting, right? Somehow you have to whatever that you decide that the key indicators are for success or to be accountable, that has to be accessible to anybody, constituents, council.
Yeah.
And I think Julie's got her hand up.
So I think you have to have names by each of these initiatives.
I didn't catch that. Wendy, did you hear her?
So I
No,
think you have to have names.
names. Okay.
Yeah. Who's responsible?
Right.
That's a good question.
Wouldn't
we
it
talked
be a
about
different person depending on what?
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about when we were going through the implementation next steps, and we talked about there are all these potential implementation partners, and that city steward, I think, is going to be important. Like, Brandon King is going to be a city steward, right?
That's right.
Yep. So, let's say there's a city steward, and I am not assigning this responsibility to anybody, but let's say there's a city steward responsible for each strategy, and those strategies are tied to performance evaluations. I mean, there's a lot of administration that goes into tracking all of that, but if we're really thinking about accountability, and who's being held accountable.
And what about the implementation and reporting timetable, which might be different for different things? There might be something that's an annual update. There might be something that's a 2050 goal that could be a 10-year update. Something might be quarterly. As far as implementation, what does that report back time frame look like? Because there's going to be some things where monthly reports won't make sense.
Yep. I'd like to know that too. We have our annual greenhouse gas inventory. There are a number of, I think in terms of like progress reports, certainly we'll want to have at least annually. We want to know where these strategies are on an annual basis. We have our 2030. This is a 2030 plan that these strategies are working towards, the 45% reduction by 2030 with the ultimate 2050, net zero. But I really, as the person who's, really focused on these climate action projects, those timetables are crucial.
So I like the reporting idea, but I would also add to that. Somebody said this earlier in the beginning, is like, how are you communicating success and failure, right? Like, what's your outreach plan for communicating the expectations, the expectations, the successes and the failures?
Yep. I like that. All right, so who's being held accountable? Who ensures accountability? How is progress reported and communicated? How can we increase and streamline interdepartmental communication and collaboration? Anyone have any good ideas on that? I think it was Carrie that brought up the example at the beginning about the equity piece. And then who owns the plan and what does that mean? That's really getting at, ownership of the plan.
It almost seems like there needs to be a commission, whether it's like the Green City Commission or something, that is, because council is got their fingers in so many things that this can't be something that they can, I don't think that they can focus on. But if there was a commission that was responsible, then that would help to hold people or accountable. Because I was thinking 2030 is not very far away. Like, you can't wait until 28 to know that you're not gonna, you're not getting the percentages you want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Okay, well, then why don't we jump over to the second question, which is how would you ensure equity is centered in the implementation of the strategies? So that first prompt, should there be a new standalone group to guide implementation, and what is their role? We do have the Green City Commission, right, with and Alicia's the mayoral appointee on that. So that's kind of like a little bit of an arm to what the projects we're doing, but they're not necessarily they do more than just RVAgreen. And then the equity piece, how do we ensure that equity is centered?
But Dawn, could everything they do fall under RVAgreen?
I could.
I mean, they may not think of it that way, but could you get them to think of it that way?
I think so. I think that's one piece of it. But then to ensure the equity part.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was thinking more about, sorry, I wasn't.
No, you're right. I think the traditional side of it, we could come up with, alignment, and I'm not directly tied to that group, so I can't speak too much on it. But I think they're more kind of advisors for council, right? So there's definitely a lot of work there that we could do. But in terms of the racial equity and environmental justice roundtable work, I like the idea of an independent commission that came up this morning in the waste group. And when do you remind us what they were suggesting?
Oh, golly. Sorry. What was it? It was similar, but they didn't think that the Green City Commission should be converted into that. They still thought that had its own separate role, and that this commission's focus should be, overseeing the plan, executing.
Oh, I know. They were talking about the Clean City Commission.
Okay,
and
right.
They have
our breakout group. We talked about green also, but yeah.
Oh, okay. In your group. In mine, we were talking about the Clean City Commission and how each district has an appointee and a volunteer. And that worked really well because they kind of had different voices and served different constituencies.
Let's see. Yeah. And Sandra put a note in the chat saying to showcase the efforts such as highlighting the communities of change. I think that's an organization. Is that correct, Sandra? I'll make that note though.
Yeah, we can look into that. So a new standalone group. And Angela, did you have any feedback from Roundtable or any other conversations you've had about accountability and transparency of this work? Or how about, did you have something?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, just kind of repeating what I said before, but the accountability piece really, I mean, in my opinion, it would be hard for it to fall on one person. But I do like the idea of implementing like a committee of some sort that someone brought up.
Mm-hmm. All right. So existing tools such as the Climate Equity Index and Equity Screening Tool. Do you know of any other tools out there that, this is the transportation group. Do you guys have any tools that you know of in this world that help to ensure that equity is centered in any kind of strategic planning?
For bus routes, we do Title VI analysis, and that uses census tract data. And when we have it, we also use the onboard rider data. Historically, we've done onboard rider surveys every 3 years, but because of how things have changed so much during the pandemic and while we've been zero fare, we are hoping that we'll be able to start doing them annually to get a better read on the reality, because it has changed so fast.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
So, like a couple things you might want to think about from maybe a kind of a statistics perspective is like, are you increasing, for example, in transportation, are you reducing the percentage of income that goes to transportation expenses?
But does that include transit? Because you wouldn't want to be reducing transit. You would want to be increasing.
So what I mean is like, if is it inevitably reducing the cost of transit? So there's two ways to increase the percentage: the wages increase, or the amount that you're spending overall. I'm not saying that people shouldn't ride transit. What I'm saying is that as a percentage of income, how can we reduce transportation costs?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You're talking about personal income.
Yes.
I don't know why I was thinking of something different. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that gets captured somehow.
Yeah, I think there's surveys and tests, and maybe that's something you guys want to think about. Is do you want to do a study at like intervals, like 3 years down the road, 6 years down the road? Do you want to do an independent study of your success?
Hmm.
And I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. The other thing is so the EPA has environmental justice EJ indicators. So like geographically, are you looking at the correlation between air pollution and low income, or minority neighborhoods, communities? Because that's those statistics. I'm sure they're going to be updating them soon because of the most recent census. So it might be a good starting point.
Okay. And then the last question was, how do we delegate power? How do we get beyond the known circles in terms of that accountability and transparency in the implementation?
Well, I feel like my independent study was delegating some power. Right?
All right. Well, certainly want to get any more good thoughts unless we're just burnt out.
So there are climate accounting organizations.
No, go ahead, Lindsay.
We started typing at the same time. I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
So tell me about that. What do you mean climate accounting organizations?
So like there's it's like gap standards. I think there's climate standards now as far as like achieving net zero goals and sustainability goals. So there are some standards now. I don't know if what I'm not sure, and I put an asterisk here, is do they have something that's equity centered? As far as how they approach climate impact.
We had a great idea this morning, if it could actually happen, where we had some number, so every day you look at the weather and you see the air quality index. Maybe there's some like climate impact or some other measurement of success that we could promote. But but getting people to really understand what we're, you know, that accountability piece and communicating it on a really simple basis. It's well established, and tying to existing kind of reporting is what we're trying to connect here. But I like that. Okay, so if you have any other thoughts, feel free to type them in the chat, put them on the stickies, email us later if you have a great brainstorm. So what's next is the content development and drafting, and we would love your help if you're willing to stay on and help us, time permitting. This is not a huge time suck. It's just a little special request if you would like to continue to help us. On that note, today, tomorrow is Wendy's last day with the city of Richmond. She is moving on. I know, we're so sad to see her go. She delivered her son to college yesterday, and her house is sold, and she's moving to the beautiful countryside, and she'll visit and stay in touch, I'm sure, but we will be sad to lose Wendy in our office.
I'll keep working on these things. So.
Yes. Yeah, it takes all of us, no matter, you know, who we're representing. It's every single person. So we're a very small office of sustainability, and we collaborate across all departments in Richmond, and we have all of our community ambassadors and partners and you guys, and we're so grateful for everyone. So we are kind of all hands on deck, looking for anyone who's willing to help us with design, graphics, editing, writing, you know, translating, any other skills that you think you might have or want to talk about the needs a little further, please let us know. But Wendy just put a link to a survey in the chat, and it's called a Community Connection Capacity Survey. And this is where we might just be able to get some feedback from you on how you could potentially help us. And then let's see, the next meeting will be in November. There's also another survey in the chat with just your standard feedback. We'd love to hear what you think of this process, how you're feeling about it. This is really a good time to check in and make sure that we have kind of, you know, you've stuck with us for the past year, and we just really, really appreciate it. Grateful for your input, sticking with us. It's been a very evolving process, and we got really far. So I think you'll be really pleased with what we got when we put it all together. It's exciting to see this actually turning into something that's gonna make some big change in Richmond. So that is all I have for you. If anyone has any feedback or general reflections, we'd love to hear them. Okay, otherwise like I said, the 2 survey links are in the chat. If you have any updates or events or resources that you'd like to share, feel free to put those in the chat. You can put them on the second slide and we can share them with the group. And I will stay on for a little longer if anyone wants to stay behind and chat with us. Otherwise, I'll give you back the rest of your afternoon, and thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Stay cool, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.